John Steinbeck is a 20th century American writer. His most famous work is The Grapes of Wrath, but he also coined a phrase, temporarily embarrassed capitalists. The Grapes of Wrath was about a family from a group of people known as the Okies, or people from Oklahoma, who were once farmers, but then an ecological disaster called the Dust Bowl forced them to travel westward to California, where they sought other jobs. Steinbeck was, of course, familiar with the plight of the American poor, and in that era, before capitalism and communism were a decided game in America, there was a large socialist movement, and Steinbeck was probably sympathetic to it. When asked why Americans did not have class solidarity like their fifth cousins back in Europe, Steinbeck offered up the idea that Americans do not conceive of themselves as poor. They think of themselves as temporarily embarrassed capitalists, because America is a country where you get to roll the dice every generation, and who knows, maybe your kids or grandkids will be rich. Whereas in Europe, class identities are more fixed. If you find a garbage man in America, he probably thinks of it as a personal failure that he's a garbage man and hopes that his kids will be like Donald Trump. But if you ask a garbage man in England why he's a garbage man, he'll probably say, I'm a bin man because my father was a bin man, and he will be happy to be a bin man. There's no personal failure associated with it. So the American poor view being poor as a personal failure, and they are ashamed to identify with that. When Trump was elected, people wondered why so many people in the trailer parks of Appalachia or the ghettos of the Bronx voted for him when it clearly went against their class interests. And the phrase was remixed a bit to temporarily embarrassed millionaires. So from temporarily embarrassed capitalists to millionaires, the same thing holds. The idea being, again, that the American poor do not perceive themselves as being poor generationally or definitionally or as an identity, but as a temporary lot that they will quickly escape from, hopefully. And we wish that for everyone, of course, who's struggling. Now, how does this relate to Iranians? I say we should call Iranians temporarily brown white people. The reason you can probably infer, given what I just said, Iranians are people who have no consciousness of themselves as being brown. And I use that word very specifically. I understand that our skin tone is not literally brown like you may find in South Asia or Southeast Asia. But I'm using brown here as a general racial term in the American context. So Hispanics are brown, Iranians are brown, Afghans are brown. Generally, caramel-colored people are called brown, right? They're not black, they're not white. We don't call Asian people yellow anymore, but that's the mindset this comes from, right? Now, Iranians are in denial about their being brown, the same way that the American poor are in denial about being poor as a class or poor as an identity. And when you ask them, well, what's the story? They will say, oh, probably my ancestors were rich and my descendants will be rich. And when you talk to Iranians, they have this same consciousness regarding their brownness. They think of themselves, and I'm going to quote a kind of famous schizo Iranian guy, Jason Reza Georgiani. They think of themselves as a once white people who were invaded by brown Arabs and yellow Asians, and who are now brown or beige because of that interaction. And in the future, maybe because of concentration camps and eugenics and all kinds of other wacky stuff a Nazi like Georgiani probably believes in, through some eugenic process, Iranians will come out the other end as that Chad, white, Nordic savior of the Iranian race. It reminds me of this meme I saw of, it was a photoshopped Homer Simpson standing in front of a mirror. It said average Iranian monarchist, and it was a brown-looking guy looking in the mirror where there was a white, silver skin and blonde hair and a Nazi armband, and he said, wow, look at me, I'm so beautiful. And I've heard tons of remarks like this. Genuinely, I had an Iranian once tell me that, you know, occasionally a good specimen of an Iranian comes out very light and blonde and blue-eyed, and you can really see what we used to look like before our genes were polluted, and hopefully we will unpollute them. We will go back to that. So it reminds me, actually, there was also a thing, Azizem, you are not white. It was a campaign. I don't know how much traction it got. Back when the BLM riots were happening, and Iranians didn't feel any racial solidarity with black Americans because they don't conceive of themselves as a minority. Just because they check the box that says white they think, oh, okay, well, I'm not a minority, right? I check the box white whenever I fill out a racial form. So Iranians have no consciousness of themselves as being non-white. If you go to Iran and say, what race are we? They'll say, we're Aryan, we're Aryai, we're like the Germans, we're like the Nazis, right? We're the same as them. And if you come here to America, they look at Mexicans and Pakistanis and think, I'm not one of you, I'm not one of you, I'm a white person. So clearly their kids don't think that they're white. They grow up with an American racial consciousness. They understand that they are some non-white category, whatever that may be, even if they're adjacent to whiteness, like Sicilians or something, or Greeks. But in any case, it's really important to understand the mindset of an Iranian who is in the diaspora, who is not conversant with Western norms and Western dialogue. So I'm not talking about second, third generation. Even the Pahlavists, however few there are among them, they are conversant with this type of thing. I'm talking about the fresh off the boat, the FOB Iranian, or the Iranian who's in Iran, or someone maybe who's lived here a long time, but still mentality-wise is stuck back in Iran. Why they think about Iran in such a particular way and why they conceptualize themselves so differently than our neighbors. So when you talk to anyone who's from our part of the world, who hasn't experienced an American intervention, but has seen Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, etc., and you say, why do you think, or how do you think an intervention will go? They will always say negatively, for sure. I mean, look at what we have so far. And regardless, even if America goes in, let's just say with good intentions, which they don't, but assuming with good intentions, as in Persian, we would say, "Ashigh chashmo abru ma ke nistan." They're not in love with our eyebrows and eyes. They're coming for their own reasons, and maybe that things will go bad. And even if things go well, ultimately they'll want your oil and all those things. So anyone from our region who hasn't been invaded, knock on wood for those people, Pakistanis and Turks and Azeris and Gulf people say, would you like American intervention? They say, well, we see how that's gone. And when you bring this up to Iranians, they say, but we are not Arabs, but we are not Muslims, but Iran is different. And this is a very common, I'm not just making this up, this isn't just one person I've spoken to, this is the default prepackaged response from a Pahlavist. When you say, how do American wars in the Middle East go? They say, but we are not Arab, but we are not Muslim, but we are not brown, but we are white, but we are Western, we are European, or something to that effect. For some reason, we are under the impression that Iran is this special case, or that Iran will be saved because we're special. And it reminds me of when Ukraine was invaded, there was a swarthy-looking Ukrainian guy in Kyiv who was getting interviewed and saying, I'm just emotional because European people with blue eyes and blonde hair are being killed. So when Ukraine was invaded, the whole world stood up, the people with inferiority complexes, and then the Europeans with their superiority complexes for the various sides of the coin. One, because they think, oh, our superior is being hurt, and the other one thinks, oh my God, my racial equal is being hurt. Everyone stood up and was upset. Now, I don't want to be cynical. Of course, for humanitarian reasons, for humanist reasons, people like myself are upset. But many people with these complexes only care because they see, again, people with blonde hair and blue eyes being killed. So the Ukrainian said the quiet part out loud. Many people think that. They're used to brown and black people being killed and suffering. But if you see one of their own blondes and whites, then that's wrong. Iranians think we count in that box. So Iranians think that when we are getting hurt, that when we suffer at the hands of our government or whoever else, that Westerners will look and think, oh my God, an Italian-looking people or a secular people with hot girls on the internet or people who simp for the West, they're getting hurt. We should go save these people. Or they think that their intervention will be with complete husna, then complete good assumptions and complete good intentions, behtarin niyat, the best intention for us. They don't have any desire for the oil, like Trump said, we're going to take the oil, okay, we're going to take the oil. None of that for Iran. They're not going to take the oil when it comes to Iran. They're not going to bomb us and invade us and occupy us and make us a glorified military base with an oil rig like our neighboring countries. They're not going to do that. When they see Iranians, they don't perceive a brown desert person. They perceive their civilizational equal. That's the perception that many Iranians have regarding themselves. Now, you might wonder, how does such a thing come about? How do such a large percentage of a population become so deluded with respect to who they even are? This is too complicated for this video. Maybe I'll make a different video explaining it. But if you like a good academic response, you need to look at a book called The Emergence of Iranian Nationalism by Reza Zia Ebrahimi, where he goes through how essentially a few Qajar-era intellectuals who were exiled or traitors to Iran even cooked up an idea that he calls dislocative nationalism that essentially posits Iranians are not a brown Middle Eastern Muslim people. They're actually a Aryan, European adjacent type of people who, instead of traveling westward to Europe with the other Indo-Aryans, never mind that some went to India, but just instead of going westward to Germany or whatever, came southward. And the Shah said so much, actually, the old Shah of Iran, the one that was deposed, not the one that's currently vying for power unsuccessfully, said that Iran's geography is an accident of history. Iranians are an Indo-European people who got lost off in the desert. So this idea is called dislocative nationalism, that Iranians are people dislocated from their place and from their history, and they are not essentially a brown Muslim, Middle Eastern, ethnic, Asian, whatever people. They are mislocated, dislocated, displaced Europeans. They are like Frenchmen who happen to inhabit the desert. As if France had successfully colonized Algeria, they would say what? It's not Algeria, it's France. On their maps, they would put C'est France or whatever. That if maybe 10 generations later, you would find a Frenchman in Africa, you could say, okay, you're living in Africa, but you're French, essentially, right? You're a French person. You just happen to be in Africa. That's what they think of Iranians as. That, oh, because we say maman and we say merci and whatnot, and because we drink wine or women wear mini skirts, that we're actually Parisians who happen to be in a place called Pars instead of Paris, right? It sounds so similar. It's almost as if we really belong there. And you really notice this with the exile patterns. Whenever Iranians leave Iran, they never go to the logical places, which is a neighboring country with a similar language and culture like Istanbul, like Dubai, like even Cairo, where the Shah is buried. They always go to Paris and America and Canada because they have this aspirational whiteness. Now, of course, everyone, aside from the Iranians who have this view, even other Iranians, such as myself, and also everyone in the world that I mentioned, laughs at this. And another reason to get rid of this idea, other than the fact that people are laughing at us, is that it will simply ground us and temper us and give us realistic expectations for the future of Iran. It will make us realize the world we're living in, that we are a Middle Eastern country, that our future could be that of Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or even Somalia, God forbid. God forbid, I don't want anything bad for any country, let alone my own country. But if we can come to terms with the fact that we are a Muslim country, we are brown, we are ethnic, it will really do a lot to make us more comfortable in our own skin, temper our ridiculous takes, make us welcome, again, likable, liked by our neighbors. And we have a lot of neighbors who love our historic culture and our high culture, our history. They're interested in our literature, but they interact with us and they find us standoffish and racist and disassociated. It would do a lot to fix a lot of the problems that I see in the Iranian community and ultimately for our own psychological health. Being or living in disconcordance with your body, having this part of you that you can't assimilate, that you can't come to terms with, having two things that you can't square, the cognitive dissonance of having a big nose, of being named Hosseini Zad, of being named Fatemeh Sayyidi Zadeh, of looking like an Arab, of having an Arab name, of having a big Semitic nose and not accepting it, of mangling that nose and changing Hossein to Hus and, I don't know, Yasaman to Yasi, and just like changing the Arab names to some Western assimilable nickname and pretending to be Western. It's not cutting it. It's cringe. People can tell. They can see what you're running away from. Everyone can see that you're not accepting who you are. And when you do that, the people who come from what you are cringe at you and see you as like a mangled, halfway there, halfway not there person. And the society that you try to attach yourself to will never fully accept you as an equal to them. So our neighbors, our Pakistanis and Afghans and Iraqis and Turks and Khaliji Arabs, they just cringe at us. And white people do not accept us as being white. Any Iranian who's grown up here knows that. So if we accepted all this, we'd be more psychologically healthy. We would have a more realistic view of Iran. And also, we would know finally, and maybe most depressingly, that no one's going to come to save us. They saved Ukraine because of that thing I said earlier, European people with blue eyes and blonde hair. But if Iranians could accept that we are not that, even if we wear contacts and dye our hair, that we are actually more like Gazans than we like to think, then we would learn that, like in the case of Gazans, no one's going to come to save us. And if we have a revolution and it goes bad, like in Syria, no one's going to come pick up the pieces but us. That's my thought. I hope that we Iranians can become psychologically healthy and accept who we are. If you want to learn Persian so that you can better understand what Iran is, what's going on, if you're an Iranian and you want to connect with your heritage, then see the link, PersianPoetics.com. We have plenty of free classes for you all. And if you like these videos, let me know. If you want me to talk about any topic, drop it below. Maybe I'll address it. Until next time.